I like Samantha's like, a friend of mine, air quotes.
Air quotes.
I specifically was keeping boundaries in place.
We can cut it. We can cut this out.
You're the
I'm
Kool-Aid
sorry.
man. You're like, oh yeah, oh yeah. We've
like
done that. Oh yeah.
Coming to you from the M&M Exterior Studio in Nooksville, Virginia, this is Flushing It Out with Samantha Spittle, the introvert's extrovert. She talks to people so you don't have to. For now.
Welcome to the after show, the Flushing It Out after show, the full flush. Because we can't fit it all in one episode.
No, and I hate having to be silent during the first part.
Especially when the episode's about sex.
Yeah.
So Jen is still here. We kept the mics on high, and so
I don't hate it. I don't mind it at all.
But you have some stuff to share. So
I write down notes and I want to talk. Yeah.
So we in the first episode, just in case you're listening to this and you didn't tune in, we went through some tips that Jen's learned and I chimed in a little, but kind of the different stages of life and the importance of sex in especially marriage, committed long-term relationship. And so I thought we would dive a little deeper into it, hear from the male perspective, and then also go through some tips because I did some market research. And to be honest with you guys, I was to ease my own anxiety over talking about this. The way I ease that is by talking about it, believe it or not, and gathering information. And the way I do that is by asking other people for their thoughts and opinions. But through doing that and through the amazing people who opened up their hearts to me and trusted me with this private information that we don't normally share with people, I got some great insight, but I also got some amazing tips on how to, spice things up, change things a little. So we'll go over those too. So after show.
Before we do anything fun,
I
do want to just share two things.
Okay.
One, I know you know Marianne, right? She's in your network. Did you interview? Yeah.
She's going to do a podcast because she's amazing.
She is amazing. And my therapist took over her practice. Yep. And I can't say enough about a really good therapist.
Amen.
Before my really good therapist, I also decided that I was going to do as much research because I felt like something wasn't quite right. And I read and listened to every single thing that Esther Perel publishes.
Okay.
And I really feel like I want to go see her, but she's not taking patients, but whatever, because now she's
Esther.
famous. But I'm waiting because I feel like even when things don't necessarily pertain to me subject matter wise, I've always come away with some bit of information. And if you listen to her, her podcast or her books on tape, books on tape. Hello, I'm 100. I don't even have a tape player. But so I have everything on Audible.
Have you tried those books on 8-track?
I have this reel. But she's amazing and so knowledgeable about sexuality and relationships. And her podcast goes from one extreme to the other, but they're always helpful. So
say that again. Who is it?
Her name is Esther Perel.
Okay.
Perel, I think. Okay. She's got a couple of books out and a podcast. And she did an audio series on Audibles where she interviewed people and couples in various stages of strife and intimacy and things like that, and just so helpful to get gather that information and be able to apply. That was amazing.
Thank you for sharing that, because that's kind of why on the main episode I was trying, I was having a hard time, but trying to say, hey guys, I want us to share kind of our experiences and what we've learned. But one, there's not enough time in the world to kind of go through everything.
Sure.
There's also boundaries to respect, and then we all have our own. For lack of a better word, we all have our own shit. Yeah. And it's just not as simple as read this blog post. You see 10 ways to spice up your marriage and da-da-da. There's so many nuances, layers, and just stuff. And so thank you for putting that out there, and that you did that and you did the work to do that.
Yeah.
Because it's easier said than done.
Well, I was royally screwing things up, I felt like, otherwise. And I was like, we have a great relationship. We have a great friendship. were ridiculously enmeshed in every way. But I knew for myself that things weren't, well, and not that he was like unaware, but I just felt like when I got some things together that weren't necessarily sex related, it like opened my eyes to like, oh, and then also this. So it all worked together.
Dang.
And Prozac.
And
if I could hug Prozac.
Yes. Take the stigma away from
that's the other thing. Good therapist, good self-reflection. And when that is not working, I wholeheartedly believe medication. I was really afraid to do it, but I so needed it. And I literally remember the day that it started working, being like, oh, I'm me again. Like I'm rational and
the way I've described like mental health is if you're in a bad place, you're in a mud pit and you're trying to dig out, but it's mud. And so you keep sliding back in. And that medication can be a rope to finally have a grasp. Yes. And you're finally having traction and getting out of that mud hole.
Yes. And you're able to do the work that needs to be done with way more clarity. I'm so glad you said that because we're like going off on it's a great tangent though, and I'm so glad we are because this is why we're doing a freaking after show, people, because we all know it's funny with nutrition, with relationships, with sex. We all know the things we need to do. We know we need to prioritize sex. We know we need to do this. We know we need to do that. But if you can't do it, that goes back to the whole that sex, if you're having issues with your sex life, it's a symptom of a bigger problem. Yes. And so you start peeling back the layers, and so you start doing the tips of, can I prioritize? Okay, sometimes I need to just push through. Sometimes I'm tired and I need to push through. But then you figure out, okay, I can't just push through. You kind of keep chipping away and to figure out what is the underlying issue. Yeah, it's like putting a Band-Aid. You're like, oh, we'll do this fix. We'll do this fix. We'll do that. But really the reality is, for me, I just really needed to do a lot of work on boundaries and value and my childhood and my upbringing and all of that played into it. And so dealing with that in therapy, but not being able to like move past, I needed that next step. So kind of right at the same moment, my therapist and actually my OB was like, I think it's time. And it had been years of working on things.
And that's probably the progression that fortunately and unfortunately, because we also don't want to put a Band-Aid on by doing medication.
Right.
But we don't want to put a Band-Aid on by not doing it. It's all just a cluster.
I'm just thankful. I'm thankful it happened the way it did. I'm thankful.
Don't be afraid to go through the process, is what I would say.
Like, super painful when your therapist is like, maybe more than one appointment a week. And you're like, I must be really screwed up.
I want so badly to do well.
I really just was hoping you'd be like every other week. And then
that's what Brene Brown said when she realized she had all these issues with vulnerability and stuff. And she went to her therapist and was like, all right, I'm going to give this like 6 weeks to work this out. And I think there's 8 years later. It's like, come on, people. That's not how it works.
No, it isn't. It's interesting. It's been good. It's lots of years. Josh and I went to therapy one time together when we were younger and we were having some problems. And she just sat back and said, I'm not really sure if I know where one of you begins and the other one ends. You're very enmeshed and we were like, yeah, we know. That's not the problem. We get it. We're like one weird twin brain, but can you fix the other stuff? And she was like, we're out of here. We didn't try again. Something we did.
You're not telling me what I want to hear.
You're not telling me what I want to hear. You can't fix this. Got it. Okay. Something we did do at that time, practical relationship tip. If you are really struggling talking to your spouse, which sometimes you just are because you are not speaking the same language and there's a lot of strife and difficult things that are hard to say to another person's face. We had a journal. So you could text your spouse now, but we had a journal. We would write. He would leave for work.
I love that. Thank you for saying that.
It was awesome. I mean, it wasn't awesome. It was actually
very
super crazy painful to be
brutal.
That. It was tough.
I'm so okay. So
I just wrote Samantha an email.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Actually, he just broke up with you via email.
An email. No, but I'm so glad you brought that up because we figured out very early on in our relationship that him writing out his thoughts is so much more productive because he's an internal processor and I'm an external processor.
I just want to talk it out.
And what happens is when he shuts down, and I learned this from Brene Brown, she uses this terminology, which I appreciated, was the story I'm telling myself. So by you being silent, I'm now filling in your silence. but what I'm filling in with my story might not be true.
Right.
And so I was like, okay, I need to start telling him, like, this is the story I'm telling. So I'm not saying this is what you're doing this. Well, he's not doing it. It's just what I'm
what
saying.
You assume. Yeah.
And then I'm so glad you commented on the journal, because we figured out, like I said, early on that he needed to write. And when he would write, because then he could think through what he was saying, he could write it. It was so much like more productive. And I started to feel like, are we that millennial generation that like can't communicate and blah, blah. And then.
I'm sorry, what?
Exactly. Thank
Sorry,
you.
I was distracted by my phone. No, I'm just kidding.
I remember this was like a random thing, but I'm sure I was watching like the morning show years ago when the kids were little, but it was like Jenna Bush came out with letters that her grandpa and grandma wrote to each other. And it was very sweet. And if you think about it, what do you think about when you think of like nostalgic old timey stuff? Love letters.
Yeah.
But when we read them, we think this is what it's like all the time. He loved her so much. She loved him so much. When they were together, they were just like, I love you. The way your hair, blah, blah, your sweet sound of, but like, no, in person, they were probably like, I got to go milk the cows or like, I'm at war, all this.
And you snore.
Yes. Like it's real life. But when they took the time to write, they processed their emotions. And so I feel like we look down, I think today, like, especially if it's electronic, like email or instant messaging and stuff like that. And yeah, that can be downfalls if you don't communicate in real life. I'm not saying we shouldn't in person, but I've found for us writing it down, whether email, a journal, like you said, writing it down allows us to then when we're together, we can kind of process it separately. And then when we're together, have a much less defensive conversation, a much less angry. If something is said that gets you a little, as Gretchen said, it rattles you, then it's resonating with you. So if something rattles you, you have time to because then it's like, that's the whole thing. If it rattles you, then it's resonating. So you have to figure out.
Hitting a nerve.
Yes. So why is this hitting a nerve? What do I need to do about it? And Christina Ammerman, we talked so much about how stuff from our childhood affects us. And to have all this in your head of like, why is this affecting me? What is this really about? When you're in a heated discussion about sex, like that is way too much stuff to be addressing.
Yeah.
So, amen. Thank you for bringing up the journaling. That's amazing.
My plug for the journal over like text is that I tend to read things at really inappropriate times on my phone. So if I'm sitting at a light, I don't really want to see like, hey, just so you know, like last night, but like when you. So
that's a great
being
idea
able
about
to like
journal.
you
the
get
whole
to
pulling
leave
of
it.
The hair
yeah,
thing.
I mean, I was like, could you just pull my hair more? No, I'm just kidding. But you get to choose when you sit down to read it, when you're emotionally ready to sit down, read what they have to say, process it.
Yes.
Our schedule was great because he worked. It was when he was in the Marines, so he was gone all day, and then I was teaching in the evening, and so he could write, and then I would read and write, and then he could read.
Yeah.
And then we could leave it there most of the time to still like salvage a pleasant evening. And so that issue wasn't taking over our whole existence.
And that's like, I think the compartmentalizing gets a bad rap, but that's where compartmentalizing is good, where you're like, okay, let's put this in this box for now.
Yes.
And I think that's why I like email because of exactly what you just said. I feel like it allows, and especially if you title it like journal and you just have a private email going back and forth. And if it goes public and people find out your shit, oh well, like whatever.
God help my children when they find the letters from boot camp. That's all I got to say.
Oh my gosh. Or listen to this
podcast. So how each child was conceived. Yeah, I mean.
That sounds like a podcast on its own.
Oh we should read them.
Oh my
so
gosh.
funny.
Can we do that in our next
I can't
speech trip?
spell, so I will read my letters.
Oh, yeah.
Because no one.
I think we need to do a drunk history, except with your love letters to each other.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that
next
would be
speech trip.
I'll be Josh. You be Jen.
I'll be Jen.
You can narrate.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait.
I remember after some kids,
You've had
feeling
so many.
like, and like I had all C-sections. Oh, sorry. That was probably noisy. Feeling like insecure about that and feeling like, oh, I have a scar and blah, blah. Yeah. And Josh being like, are you kidding me? He's like, I'm still 12, like boobs. Like this is happening right now. And not to like minimize that or like make it seem like he's that, but that's true.
But
like,
he is attracted
he's not
to
like,
you
oh
no
my
matter
God,
what.
you have cellulite on your thigh. Like he's
So
like,
that was-
what is cellulite? You have boobs. Like
I remember seeing a tip about, and this goes to show how important goes to show how important what we project to young people, because it makes a difference. But an actual good thing I remember reading, I feel like it was in Cosmo magazine, but it was like a tip, but it was like, girls, like, he does not care about your body. He just cares about that you're naked. And I remember like my insecure, teenage self thinking like, oh, who would ever want it? But like that kind of stuck in the back of my head. So whenever I start to feel insecure, I always think like, I remember reading in a magazine once. So it must be true.
It must be true.
Yeah.
I read it on the internet.
And I read it on the internet. Lincoln said it. I'm actually curious to hear some of your insight, Jeremy, because like I said, we go to girls' nights, whether we're drinking or not.
Right.
Stuff always comes up. And I feel like, I think I touched on the husband pack on a past episode, but to recap the husband pack, which is you share with people who know and respect and love your husband appropriately. And so you can share like real stuff and it's not disrespectful. It's respecting boundaries and things like that, because I think that you don't just share your stuff with everyone. And so I'm blessed to have good friends that we can share stuff with. And so I feel like we, meaning my friends, have lots of healthy conversations about sex and how we're feeling. And kind of the elephant in the room that I would kind of point out is kind of the whole like women not always being in the mood. That's kind of the one where it's like, yeah, I could take it or leave it. Mm-hmm. But for men, that's very, as you said, demoralizing. It's very rejection and things like that. And then what happens is, if we're just going to be talking honestly about it, is that it's kind of the crazy cycle where, they feel rejected, but then it comes, well, then I'm the one, me as in for me, I'm a woman. So whoever in the relationship is like this, the one who's not in the mood, it becomes like, well, something's wrong with me. Mm-hmm. But then I know from talking to other people that like, no, like it's pretty common that stereotypically women we're touched so much. We're this, we're that. But then when you're in the middle of a conversation, it turns into a argument, because even though he might not mean it to be insulting, it feels very like there's something wrong with me, so then I feel the need to defend myself. Like it just turns into that whole crazy cycle.
Yeah. We've had lots of conversations where, I mean, he was right. That's recorded forever.
Sorry, what?
I said,
could you repeat that?
What?
I think I said, Ross is right. But he would be like,
actually,
he was right.
That's right.
But his point was, I feel like more times than not, having that particular conversation about being in the mood or not being in the mood and is it a priority, isn't, you make a lot of time for a lot of other things. So on top of it being like him feeling rejected because I'm like, well, I'm just like not that interested in it. And he's like, but you make a lot of time for other things and other people, and not like in a dig, like I should be as important as, X, Y, or Z. But if you're going to fall asleep when we watch a movie, maybe we shouldn't watch a whole movie starting at 10 o'clock at night or whatever it is. And he's right. Yeah. Like, so figuring out that what I needed was a little decompression time, a little space between mom and Jen. And that's what I need. Not, I could care less about what it is that we're doing. I just need a minute to figure that out. And that window between when I'm relaxed and like sound asleep.
When we deal with kids touching us all day, if you're breastfeeding, if it's that time of the month, if it's that stuff that's uncomfortable to talk about, but let's just do it, guys. We're here. I think that's why talking about it in a non-stressful state of like, hey, I just want you to know what I'm dealing with all day. I'm dealing with fluids coming out of my body. So I'm sorry, I can't go from dealing with multiple fluids from multiple places to happy time. And so, but then I'm so glad I got the one tip about not to talk about it in bed. Like that is not the time.
Now is not the time.
Yeah. But if you can have a general conversation about it, I'm going to have to post this picture on I'll post it when this episode goes live, because Hank's face is
he's not having it.
So
funny. He's one of his lip is like
up.
tucked up under his teeth. It's the other side.
Oh my gosh.
And he's like
So anyway, I think the more I've kind of been a little bit real with him, but in the right context, because even if you say those things and you just think you're being real, but it's not in the right context, it's still insulting. I've just learned that too.
That is true. And it's way easier to be respectful of something if you have conversation outside of it. Like, no, this is not just me being like weird. Because I feel like in that particular situation, you could be like, no, it's okay. Like, I don't mind. And you're like, no, I just don't like it.
Yeah.
And that can get weird. But outside.
That's why morning coffee chats. I'm glad you talked before in the other episode about the breakfast dates.
Yeah.
But it's a time where you can talk about it, where you're not like pressure or like this has to happen. Oh, so that was one of the tips I got yesterday, which was 2 tips. One said schedule it, and one walked by and said don't schedule it. And I said, let's find the happy medium, which was you schedule it, and then that way you know about it. And then, I forgot to see someone brought this up and I forgot about it, is that you think you won't look forward to it. But then someone's like, you actually do, because then like you know that more, like for women, you can start mentally preparing. So it's not, it takes the pressure off. But then to keep it from feeling scheduled is you have to do the spontaneous stuff. So it can't just be scheduled. No. But when you mix scheduled in with spontaneous.
Imagine Jeremy was like, so in 9 days, I'm going to try and find you attractive. Like, that's how they see it.
I know. But if he said to me, we're going to, every Saturday morning, we're going to have coffee on the back porch and just talk, then I would feel like, okay, I won't be as bitter if we don't get to have the heart-to-hearts that I want every day, because I know that at least Saturday, we're going to try our best to make sure we have that time. And then if we have another conversation throughout the week, that's a good conversation, that's a bonus. So for me, I feel like if we have a scheduled fun time together, then yeah, it might not be as great, but we know throughout the week that like, okay, I might not, kids were up talking too late, we're doing stuff. At least we'll have that. That's kind of, I know we'll at least have that connection time. And then if we have more, then that's great. That's my perspective on it, which might not be his. And I like that you bring up, Matt, how would you feel if it's a different example? So it's good to bring that up.
You were talking about having sex before a date as sort of a tip. Like, hey, if you don't want the pressure of having sex after a date.
When you want.
Yeah, anytime.
Right? Like, but so before the date, but yeah.
But the thought that I had that I wrote down while you guys were talking and I was doing my thing, being silent, was that post-sex conversation is so much easier and so much more fluid than pre-sex conversation. What? There's a lot of slips in this.
There's a lot.
Freudian slips.
But so there's no pressure. There's no pressure.
Oh, I see what you mean. So what you're saying is that if you do it ahead of time, you can just enjoy dinner because there's not this underlying tension of are we or aren't we? And we're on the crazy cycle. And by the time we're done with this, are we going to be off the crazy cycle? Is this going to, how's
it going to work when we get home?
Is she going to be too,
we have to drive the babysitter home and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, like if I drive the babysitter home, you're going to be asleep when I get home.
Am I going to be like naked waiting in bed for her when she gets back from dropping the babysitter off?
Is she going to have to poop?
Is she going to have to poop from that big dinner we had?
Is the mood really going to be there? Right. Is it going to be midnight?
Yes.
And am I going to be too tired?
Yeah.
Is she going to be too tired?
Yeah.
There's so much that goes into post-sex, post-date sex.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a lot of pressure.
Just get it over with and
just
take the pressure off.
Mm-hmm. Just while you're getting ready, just
take the pressure off by putting the pressure on.
There you go. Hey there.
Quote. All right. Any other points?
We're going to air this.
When it comes to sex, everybody's got their own crazy shit in their head.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that having years of conversation about sex was like, let's just try and get our crazy like on the same page so that we are in this together instead of not.
Yes, we're on the same team. That's something that it's funny. I did not hear that advice in the context of sex, but hello, it was still in marriage. Is that like so often we feel like we're against our spouse, that we're just like knocking heads. And it's like, wait, we need to pull back and have that reminder like, wait, we're on the same team.
Yeah. Like if we're on the same team and we are for good sex in our relationship and one person really wants a thing, the other person should maybe be willing, within reason.
Yes.
It's not an easy conversation and it hasn't been an easy conversation, but it is something that we have been able to somewhat come to don't want to say agreement because it's not like we have like a handshake agreement. It's just like
this
is the thing. Yeah, a formal like a contract about.
You signed a contract with your husband about porn.
Yep, that's what we did. But
did you get it notarized?
Oh, that was awkward bringing it to the
notary
house or whatever. Yeah.
Well, the notary was at a strip club. So
perfect.
Oh, yeah.
Made it very convenient. But no, that brings up a good point, though.
Give me an extra one, and I'll sign it. I'll notarize that for you.
So funny. You can have conversations in theoreticals. Make time. Prioritize.
Right.
But then it's
what
like,
does that mean?
What does it mean? And so I'm so grateful for people who've opened up their hearts and whatnot to share some practical tips. And so there's some that are pretty standard. Like I feel like, we've heard them before and stuff, but to bring them up again to remind people. So one of the tips I got, which we've been talking about this whole time, but it actually falls under the category of spicing up, is to talk about it.
Yeah.
To communicate about it, to take the stigma away from your spouse of being able to talk about it. And then also,
and like while Jeremy's peeing right now, but like he'll never listen to this.
Yeah,
but
never.
Like something that's like really kind of good is really the idea that I am willing to talk about it and willing to entertain various things and like have my own idea about what is fun or spicing it up, if you will. Like all of that is very attractive to the other person. So like just the idea that you're willing to be a more sexual person.
And the fact that you want to.
Right, exactly.
Do that. The other thing too is starting early. So one thing I talked start them early, meaning in the day. And so because women aren't just
not like premarital sex.
No.
Sorry.
No, but not like you just say, oh, I want to do this now and suddenly go from 0 to 60. And so it talks like I was talking with some people about it's the little touches here and there that we need that physical connection every day to have a little touch and not just,
that's not weird, Jeremy.
If he starts touching me, then that just means, oh, now I know what he wants. But it's doing that every day, like whether you're going to do it or not, but doing the hugs from behind, just even the little poke or like just that I'm not going to touch you the way I'm going to touch my friend. Like just
something different.
Little things. Because the other thing that I was talking with a friend about was that there's the micro rejections. So there's the micro little touches that you get to build the mood. But then there's also that when you try to reach out and hold a hand and you get rejected. If you try to do this, those are the things that to kind of have those little unfulfilled needs.
Yeah.
I think the micro rejections are those unfulfilled needs. They're just chipping away so that when it comes time to whatever you want to call it, sexy time, fun time, whatever, it's like my bucket is depleted because of all these little dips.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
You can kind of flip the script and give little touches throughout the day. Focus more on when you watch TV sitting next to each other instead of in your own places across seats away or something, little things like that. So, and then also texting, like that was a tip that I got. A woman came and spoke at a networking event, funny enough, but it was about maintaining the intimacy with your spouse. And she was saying how in this area, because we live in a place where a lot of people have government jobs and secure phones, it was like no one wants to like text anything inappropriate on their phone. But she brought sext, exactly.
Sexting.
Which, that just is, I'd be worried about like my kids seeing it or something. But she brought up a point that I felt like is worth sharing to you guys is that she's like, have you ever seen a news story or anyone get reprimanded for sexting their spouse? No, guys. It's when it's a prostitute or underage. True. Like, it's when it's illegal and whatnot, or an affair of, a person. But it's like, if someone's just telling their spouse, hey, can't wait to see you tonight, eggplant, peach. Whatever emojis you want to use.
I just heard a song that he sends me peach emojis.
Oh, can't wait.
That's the chorus. He sends me peach emojis. Look it up.
Oh, that's funny. But that I don't think anyone's going to care about, your text.
That's a really good point.
Texting your spouse. So
yeah, and that's valuable too.
And then people also talked about toys and role playing, and those two things, the toys for one, different things. The tip was that start it young when you don't need it. Not once again, early on in your relationship. Oh my gosh, that's so inappropriate. Start it early on in your relationship.
Age.
Stockings
not
Stubborn.
age.
But doing that before you necessarily need it, so it takes, once again, away the taboo of it, and that it's not weird to use because one day you will possibly need it, they said. So
What?
possibly. I mean,
Like, need it?
well, might want it to spice things up. I mean, you're only at the 25-year mark. When you're at the 35-year mark, who knows? I don't know. I don't know these things. This is why I had to gather information. The other one was find a great lube, start using it early because it won't be a transition later when you really do need it, when things start changing in your body.
We should air this part first so the kids never listen to it. They're like, nope, not for me.
Find a great lube.
Find a great lube.
No
Check,
thanks. The next episode.
No, thank you. Well, if you like that tip, you'll love the Kegel pelvic floor exercise tip. So this is a common people that have had C-sections often don't know this, but when you...
Yeah, I'm going to high-five myself.
Yeah. Okay. We're putting this
Don't worry, it's
anyway.
already explicit.
We're doing it explicit anyway.
You can say whatever you like.
So when you've had babies, a lot of times that area, jumping jacks, laughing, sneezing can cause pee to come out. And then that can affect your sex life. And so there's pelvic floor Kegel exercises that work. And there's a couple other things you can work on. And also increasing blood flow to areas. These are actually some of this. I'm kind of falling into some of the tips that they got with helping with things. Okay. So getting back to toys, role playing, there's an app, a Kindu app, someone told me about. And so it's an app where you and your partner each answer questions. And it's almost like a Tinder, except for sex with your husband. So it gives you like...
Or wife.
Yeah, or a wife, whoever's using it. But it basically it asks you all these questions, you answer them, and then if you match on things, it gives you ideas like, hey, try this, try that.
I think that as human beings, we all struggle in similar areas, if not the exact same areas, whether it's sex or anything else.
Yeah.
So to even hear that other people have the same thoughts or the same conversations or the same struggles as you, I think can be therapeutic. So... yeah.
So to wrap it up, which we didn't do in the first episode because I just forgot because of the new format, there's the 2 closing questions, which is any recommendations. It kind of started out with book recommendations.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm like, screw it. It could be anything. Books, TV shows, drinks, vacation destinations. I don't freaking care. Anything. What do you recommend?
Prosecco and diet grapefruit? Is that...
Yeah, I recommend that with no ice.
Yeah. Room temperature, baby. So any recommendations? And then the second thing is, what conversation do you either want to start or stop having? So, it could not related to this topic at all. So is there something that is not being talked about that you want to talk about more? Or is there something that is talked about a lot, but you want to say, hey, let's wrap that up, not talk about that? So recommendations. You are an audio book addict.
Yes.
So I know that you are big on the books, but is there anything that you say, whether books or anything in life?
Okay.
Podcasts?
Podcast besides this one.
Yeah, besides this one, of course.
I don't know. I don't really have a podcast.
I don't know if there are really any others worth listening to.
No, there's probably not.
Seriously.
This is it. This is the only one. I would say I recommend...
Well, you kind of already recommended the therapists.
I really do think
that podcast and that person is a great recommendation.
Awesome book.
What's her name again?
Esther Perel.
Okay, Esther Perel.
If you're having relationship issues, if you're not having relationship issues, I think something to take away from just our conversation too is that this is maybe a little sexist and weird, but I also think that as wives to recognize that our husbands are still those 12-year-old boys that are thinking about sex all the time. And so either choosing to be that muse or not is the reality, whether that's politically correct, whether that's right or wrong. I'd rather be a part of that than not be a part of that and make it a part of our relationship. And
that's where I think that's okay to share. Being someone who is sensitive and tries her best to think about everyone, I think that it's okay to share that because that's your reality. Yes. And that if someone is in a situation similar, then that's a great point of view. If you're not, if it doesn't feel right, then you can, this is not the tip, you would say. This is not the takeaway. But I think it's okay to share your
doing some
experience.
Self-reflection and some talking is probably the takeaway then, right?
Yeah.
To like figure out your own sexuality and then how that works with the person that you're committed to probably is a better takeaway. And I recommend that.
That's great. I think that's really good.
That's it.
Thank you for just busting open this
awkward conversation
that we tried to not have awkward, but it is life. So thank you, Jen. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you to myself. I'm going to give
for surviving this conversation. Samantha's going to need a Xanax or something.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. You're awesome. Love you all.
Bye. I'm going to use my sexy voice.
Thanks for listening to Flushing It Out with Samantha Spittle. Music provided by twinmusicom.org. Song titled Night at the Dance Hall. Sound editing by me, Jeremy Spittle. A special thanks to our studio sponsor, M&M Exteriors. Visit their website at mmexteriors.com for all of your roofing, siding, and gutter needs in the Northern Virginia area. Visit our website at flushingitout.com and be sure to subscribe. This has been a Spitfire production.
I'm going to use my sexy voice.